Hi, my name is Kent Lee and I teach computer science at Luther College. In this video I'm going to introduce you to the Runtime Stack. The Runtime Stack is a data structure that contains a stack of what are called activation records. I like to think of the Runtime Stack as one of those carts in a cafeteria where you push trays onto the cart and you take trays off of the cart. You always push onto the top and you take the tray back off of the top, or a stack of plates. Sometimes cafeterias just have stack of plates where you can push the top plate onto the stack and you can take the top plate off of the stack, and there's this spring underneath that kind of pushes the plates or the trays up so that you can always get the next plate or tray. So I like to think of a stack in computer science like that kind of a device there. You push things onto a stack, you pop things off of a stack, you take them back off the top. There is a stack that is associated with every program that you run, and it's called the Runtime Stack, as I said, and that stack contains what are called activation records. So an activation record contains information about the local variables, basically a copy of each of the local variables for that code or that function that we're executing. And we can actually watch that in progress in a program by stepping into a program. So this button right here is the Step Into button in the Wing IDE, and I'm going to step into this program so I can watch it execute. And we're going to start here by importing math at the beginning, and I'm just going to click Step Into as I go through and execute. Now, stepping into this function definition does nothing. If you watch, if I click Step Into, I jump right over it, and that's because defining a function does not execute it. So I am not executing the code here for polar to x or polar to y. I'm simply defining those functions. I get down to the main code here, and I'm going to step into this code, and that means I'm going to follow the function call right up to this program right up here. So you can, or the function right up there. So you can see I jump into that function, and I am actually in the I actually have a runtime stack that I'm working with at this point, and I can look at that stack by clicking on Stack Data down here at the bottom. Here is my runtime stack at this point. I have two activation records on that runtime stack, the module activation record and the polar to x activation record. And that's because I have right now executed this code, which is part of my module level, and I've jumped into, from that code, I've jumped into this code. There is one activation record for this polar to x function call that I've made, and there's one activation record for this code that I'm executing down here. I'm actually going to stop this and I'm going to start again so we can watch and see what happens here. So if we look at the stack at this point, I have just a module level activation record at this point. I have not made any call to any functions. When I go ahead and click Step Into to jump over this, again, I still only have a module level activation record because I'm just defining the function. I'm not calling it at this point. Still only a module level activation record. And I get down here and it's still only a module level activation record. Now I'm ready to make the call, and in fact I should point out this locals right here shows me the local variables that are currently defined for a function or for the main code, the module level code in my program. At this point I have not defined any variables yet. I have not defined x and y. So the only thing I see in here is this built-in doc file and name, which are provided by Python. So I click Step Into, I jump to this code here, and now I have two activation records. I have the module level one that I was looking at before, but on top of that, although it displays below it here in Wing IDE, but it's on top of, it's the top activation record on the stack, I have this polar to x. Polar to x right now has r and theta defined, so when I see locals here, here is r and here is theta. They are the two variables that are currently defined, the two formal parameters to the function. I'm also going to define x here in just a moment, so I'm going to step over that, and there I see that x is now defined. So I have r, theta, and x are the three values, and if I click Step Into one more time, I'm actually going to see the return value there too, so I can see what's going to be returned from the function. These are all the local variables for this polar to X function call. If I switch to the module level activation record, I can see where I called polar to X from. So I can see where I called polar to X from, and I can see the local variables that are local to the module level code. And again, none have been defined yet. I can switch back very easily by going here and picking the polar to X, the top activation record in this case, and looking at all the variables that are in its activation record. So this lets me trace in my program exactly where I came from. I came from line 12, and I called the polar to X function and jumped into this code, and I'm currently at line 5 ready to execute. So I go ahead and click return, and I come back to line 13, and I can come back to line 13 because the activation record also keeps track of where did I come from, and so that when I return back to the place I need to return to. So this is the runtime stack, and if I continue this on a little bit further here, I go ahead and click step into one more time here. I've got the module level, and then I've got the polar to Y level activation records. So the module level activation record here has X defined right now, and the polar to Y has R and theta defined right now. So I click step into one more time. I'm going to have my return value R, theta, and Y defined for this function, this polar to Y function, which I am now going to return from in just one more click of my step into here. And I'm back to Y, and we can back to the print Y, and we can see I only have a module level activation record at this point. So activation records are created each time I call a function, and each time I return from a function, I pop the top activation record off of the runtime stack. We can watch all of this happen in Wing by clicking on stack data here and looking at this drop down, which is our stack of activation records, and we can examine each activation record by looking at the locals. The locals just show me exactly what's in that activation record that is currently selected. That should help us a little bit in understanding how our programs work, and also how to debug our programs, because sometimes we need to go and trace back through the runtime stack and see where it was that we came from when an error occurs. And clicking on stack data here and selecting different activation records will let us trace back through our program and see where we came from.